If you're looking to deploy applications with AI integration, you can do that easily with Azure Cognitive Services. Using a language of your choice, you are able to use the pre-built model that comes with it or customize it. And you're also able to deploy it on premises or in the cloud. That's what myself and my guests are going to be walking you through on today's episode of the Tech Talk. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel so you can get notified anytime I publish new content on the channel. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. So let's delve right in. Hello, everyone. You're welcome to today's episode of the Tech Talk with me, Kazeem. Today on the show, we're going to be looking at how we can add intelligence to our applications that we build on Azure. And of course, I'm not alone. Today, I have Daron Yoden with me to help out with today's topic. Hi, Daron. Welcome to the Tech Talk Show.
Hey, how you doing?
Yes, very well. All right, Daron. So let's kick things off with learning a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay, that might be a long story, man. Let me try to keep it short. So right now, what I do is I worked at Microsoft. It's been a year I joined Microsoft, and I help our customers that are either moving to Azure, moving their apps to Azure, or building apps in Azure, kind of get the best of the platform as possible. So that's essentially what I do. I mean, my title is Azure App Dev Lead for the whole Middle East and Africa region. So we have a huge team that works with, all of our customers across the region, and we help everyone kind of, move their apps to Azure, and, getting the most of the platform, like I've said, because there's a lot. The platform is huge. So, and there's a lot of flexibility in there as well. So for us, it's really very important to ensure that our customers' apps are running in a very performant and efficient way, and that's where we come in and help them out. So that's what we do day to day. Before that, if I did go a little bit to the past, I'm coming from a pretty much 10 years of startup background. So we have built two products in the past. I was leading teams that built two products, again, totally on Azure, platform as a service, not a single VM ever used. I'm not a VM person. So it was Azure PaaS all the time. So that kind of spins, two different startups that kind of spins into around 10 years, roughly. And before that, there's another 8 to 7 years where I had another company where we were doing a lot of consultancy and tailor-made software development. So that kind of pretty much, summarizes all my life, I guess, other than high school, maybe.
Okay, okay. Since the topic we're talking about today is around AI, right? So it's AI related. What
Mhm.
tools are available to developers for building AI powered applications?
Oh, there's a lot. And when we start talking about the tools, the most important, the most crucial differentiation is what is what are your capabilities in terms of are you an organization when there's a where you have a data science team, right? In that case, your needs and wants are very different compared to an organization where you don't really have the data science team, you don't have the time or the resources to invest into building a data science team from scratch, right? Or your needs sometimes do not necessarily require that you build a data science team from scratch. So we kind of usually separate. I personally separate these into three different buckets, right? So the first bucket is the classic, the data science team, AI, ML workloads, custom totally. You do everything manually from scratch. So what does that mean? You gather your data, you clean your data, you make sure it's in a proper structure, right? And then you have you run a full blown AI ML experiment All right, what does that mean? You have a question in mind that you think you want to experiment with, right? You have a question in mind that you want to experiment if you can answer that question with the data that you have through AI/ML or not, right? So that's kind of the experiment. So you pick a model, you set up the parameters and so on and so forth, and you run the experiment, and then as a result of it, you either succeed or learn something out of it, and you keep iterating until probably you hit a time box or something, or you figure out that either the data is missing and you cannot answer the question or so on and so forth, right? That's the whole flow of an ML experiment. So that's one bucket. The On the other end of the spectrum, what we have here is the applied AI stuff. So what does that mean? So those are workloads that are already proven that can be run with AI and ML. So let me give you an example, right? I mean, on this part, when we were talking about experimentation, we had a question in mind, but we didn't know if we could answer the question. We didn't know if it was a feasible question, if it makes sense. But on this other spectrum, applied AI, for example, if you want to do OCR is the simplest example, right? Or NLP. We know that AI and ML do help these workloads. This is already, the questions are already answered. So, and those are proven workloads and, common workloads, right? A lot of people have these needs, and we know that we can use AI, ML to help move these workloads, right? So if you have for example, a document that has to be scanned and an invoice, right, and you have to digitize that and be able to extract all of the key value pairs, line items from an invoice, right? We know that we can use a combination of image recognition plus OCR, plus maybe on top of that NLP if there's anything that relates to that, right? So we know that we can use these technologies, these AI ML type of workloads, and get something out of it. So, and that bucket is the bucket we call applied AI. So if you want to do object recognition on an image, we know that we can do it with AI. So we don't have to run a full-blown from scratch experiment, kind of try to figure out how can we detect an apple in an image or not, right? So those applied AI services, obviously, they are very high level, right? They're turnkey. Most probably, the organization that is going to implement these services, they do not need a data science team, right? Those are usually, you're going to find those services as simple REST APIs where any developer can come in and can tap in and start using these services. So that's kind of the applied AI bucket. And then in the middle, there's AutoML, right? And the way I kind of define AutoML is a brute force. I mean, this is my definition. Maybe, I don't want to take ownership on the definition, but I'm not sure if this is a common one or not. But what I'm saying is, how I define it is AutoML is a brute force approach to ML, right? So you have a scope in terms of how much resources you're going to use to test out things, and then you come in and say, obviously you can, mask out. If you have the know-how in the team, you can mask out some of the algorithms and stuff, and that kind of ensures that you have a more optimized brute force approach. But at the end of the day, what you're having is you have data, you're asking a question, and you're not sure how you can answer that question, and you're having AutoML to run those experiments in an automated fashion, and then tell you which one of these algorithms, which one of the hyperparameters, which set of the hyperparameters gets you the highest, let's say prediction, right? So, and that's in the middle. So on applied AI, you don't have to have a data science team. On AutoML, if you have it, it can be helpful, obviously. Is that a must? I wouldn't say so. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are services and tools that helps when you want to run a full-blown experiment. And for example, if you look at Azure, we have, right, services on all these layers. We have even more granularity, to be honest. I just didn't want to make it really complex, but you can go Azure ML Studio and have your own. I mean, you can combine it with Azure Synapse. You can have your full data warehouse there. You can connect it with Azure ML Studio. You can have your experiments and stuff running there. You can do all that manual work that you want to do as a data scientist, right? And then we got AutoML, which you can use again in Azure ML Studio. You can run AutoML workloads. You can do it on a Synapse, Spark, notebook as well if you want, using Python. And then when we go into applied AI, we have a huge set of first off, services such as forms cognizer, right? That can do all that stuff. Louis is another service that we have, and there's a huge pile of cognitive services as well. It's a suite of services that comes with a lot of AI capabilities, and some of these services are really very high level. Some of them are a little bit lower level within that box of applied AI, right? Let me give you an example. One of the interesting ones that I really like as an example is there is a service, there's a REST API that does smart image cropping, and it's called Smart Thumbnail. What it does is you give it an image. You don't even have to download and upload the image. You simply give the URL of the image, and then you say, hey, this is the resolution I want it to be cropped to, right? 500 to 500. And what it does is it looks into the image, it detects point of interest first, and then does the cropping according to the point of interest. So how does that, what does that mean? So let's say you have an image, and on the right hand side of this image there's a person, right? So when you crop it, you don't want to cut the person's head, right? You don't want to do that. You want to crop accordingly. You want to keep the person kind of in the image, right? So that means you have to first detect the point of interest, in this case the person, right? And then crop accordingly. So there's an API for this. There's a REST API for this. So you don't have to know how to process images, right? You don't have to know how to detect the point of interest, right? There's a bunch of AI ML stuff going on in that process, but you don't have to know any of that, right? You simply use the REST API and you are done with it. So it's a really very high level service that is really razor focused to a particular workload, which in this case simply smart image cropping, and that's it. And then, still in the applied AI bucket, when we go down, for example, there is custom vision API. What does that mean? Again, we mentioned that, if you're looking for an apple in an image, Cognitive Services can do it for you. It can recognize an apple. But what if there's a custom object that you want to recognize that AI will not recognize? What could that be? Maybe I want to recognize this remote, right? This is a special remote that we are producing in our manufacturing and whatever, right? This is an air conditioning remote, by the way. But I'm not sure if the default model that comes with Azure will recognize this. Maybe it's just going to say remote. But what if I have different models of remotes in the company that we're producing, and we want to be able to recognize those? Should I go and start from scratch with the whole image processing thing? No. I mean, custom vision, it still does the vision part essentially, but you can bring in your data and train that model. So if you have, let's say, 50 different images of this removed, you can actually simply upload on a website, right? Upload all of these images and train the model further by simply clicking buttons on the portal. So it's as simple as that. So you have training data. The model itself is about object detection and object recognition. So the underlying, set of algorithms are still the same. We just want to change the training data or add additional training data. So I still don't want to create the whole world from scratch, right? So I want something really easy. I just want the ability to be able to bring my data. So you can still do as part of the applied AI, right? We mentioned that applied AI is really turnkey out of the box, and a lot of these, things that they come pre-trained, but You can still come in and do custom training as well. You don't have to fall back all the way back to the, let's do everything from scratch world, right? So maybe too long of an answer for a simple question that you have asked. But, when you ask now what tools we do have, there are a lot of tools, and it really depends what your needs are and what your capabilities in terms of skilling and enablement within the organization are. And again, based on the project as well. I mean, you might have the capability, but maybe for a specific project you don't want to use that capability because it doesn't make sense, right? You don't want to, again, create the same thing from scratch that is already out there.
We have a lot of developers now who would like to shorten the development lifetime, and also given that we have many citizen developers now. So just to put some little context to this, also for those who are completely new to this, what
Mm-hmm.
would you say an example of an AI-powered application that we
Mm-hmm.
can create with Azure without having to code it? Like a
Mm-hmm.
good example.
Yeah. So one example would be I'm gonna kind of roll back to this a forms recognizer thing that I mentioned, right? So let's say you have I mean, this is actually a real life case. So there's this shopping mall in Dubai, okay, and they have a loyalty program. Every time you buy something in the shopping mall, you get a receipt, right? So every time you do a purchase, they want to credit you some loyalty points. Okay, that's as simple as that. But the problem is those receipts that you get within those stores, which are owned by different entities, right? They're not owned necessarily by the mall. All the receipts are different. And as a customer, when you go to the shopping mall, you do some shopping, you get the receipt. The loyalty program is a shopping mall loyalty program. So it's a full mall loyalty program. So you have a mobile app, and what you have to do is to type in the information on that receipt on a mobile app that is provided by the shopping mall so that you can get points for the shopping mall. You can use those points for maybe for free parking or whatever, right? So in this case, they are using AI. The specific service is called Forms Cognizer. They're using that to build a mobile app that can actually, with the mobile app's camera, you can take a photo of the receipt. And once you do that, it is able to recognize the name of the store, how much money you have spent in that store, the numbers and all that. And then it is able to first validate if that receipt belongs to a store in the shopping mall, and then process the numbers on the receipt and give you credit in terms of the loyalty points. So that whole process can be automated through scanning and recognizing the content on a receipt, and AI does that automatically without you needing to type in yourself, right? So this is just one use. And in this case, there's obviously, an implementation. There's a mobile app, right, that is being developed by a company. I mean, if you don't want to have that, there is this platform that is called Power Apps. It's a low-code, no-code platform. What does that mean? You can build mobile apps without writing a single line of code. And Power Apps itself, it has AI Builder in it. And one of the features that it supports is form recognition. So you can actually build not necessarily exactly the same app, but you can do form scanning and insights extraction from forms on a Power Apps without writing a single line of code as a citizen developer, like you mentioned.
At what point does it become necessary now for one to have like machine learning experience to work with Azure Cognitive Services?
Okay. So when you are using cognitive services, you don't need to know machine learning. it will be helpful if you know the high level concepts. And by high level concepts, I mean training. What does training mean? You have some data, you are training a model. What is a model? The thing, the algorithm that actually does whatever we call AI ML, right? Let's go with an example, right? You have an image and you want to recognize this removed, right? So in this case, the thing that is going to recognize, we call that the model, the logic essentially. So you might need to know that. Training data, right? So I'm going to have hundreds of pictures of this if I'm going to use this to train, and this is called training data. So kind of high level concepts. If you're going to customize things, knowing those high level concepts definitely helps. But other than that, you don't need to know machine learning to be able to use cognitive services.
Okay, can you walk us through a real world example where the built-in model that comes with Azure Cognitive Services won't be sufficient to get the job done? And is it easy to also create custom model easily?
So if it doesn't come out of the box, the customizations that you can do, other than bringing your own data and training the model, right? The additional customizations that you can do, they differ based on what applied AI service you're using. For example, if you are using Lewis, which is a relatively low-level applied AI service, I mean, it's part of the, there is a chatbot service as well, obviously. But so, for example, in the case of NLP, what you can do is, again, you're actually bringing new data in terms of the training for it. When I think of it right now, you're not necessarily customizing the algorithm. You are changing the data that is used to train the model. When we talk about applied AI services and cognitive services, I don't want to say 100%, so that I'm going to say 99%, so that in case there's something I'm missing, I'm going to leave a possibility for that. But 99% of the time, the way you customize the service is through bringing additional training data. It's not necessarily coming in and altering the algorithm that is used in the model. If you want to do that, you're going to need to fall back into regular machine learning and the data science stack.
Thank you very much once again, Daron, for your time on today's episode of the show. Any last words from you before we say bye-bye now?
Oh, sure. I mean, thank you. First off, thank you for having me. This was really fun. So for those who are new in AI ML, what I would suggest is go and start playing with the applied AI stuff, right? I'm assuming you have a little bit of a development knowledge. If you do, go ahead and start playing with those services. If you still don't, you can go to website. I mean, one thing that I remember right now is there's a website called customvision.ai, for example. If you go to that website, you can actually build a custom object recognition model yourself without writing a single line of code. That's one thing that I would suggest. Go and start playing with it. The other thing that might be interesting is to start playing with Power Apps, so that you get that, how do I build apps without writing code? And in Power Apps, you can start experimenting with the AI builder that can open the door into the applied AI services as well. So those two things might be nice playgrounds for those who are interested.
Okay, all right. So this is how much we've got time for on today's episode of the show. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do, and smash the like button if you like this particular video. So thank you very much once again for your time on today's episode. So it is myself and Daron saying bye-bye now, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Thank you.